You know, in the crowded waters of the Strait of Hormuz, there's a U.S. naval operation going on right now. And yeah, it's about ships and high-stakes diplomacy, but it's also forcing us to ask a really big question about the rules that govern our world. And these rules don't just apply here, they apply everywhere, in every critical waterway across the globe.
So, here's the big question. Is a military blockade an act of war? And believe me, this isn't just some academic debate for stuffy classrooms. The answer has huge, real-world consequences for everything from global trade to the balance of power, all the way from the Persian Gulf to the Taiwan Strait.
Because what's happening right now, in one of the most critical shipping lanes on the planet, means we can't ignore this question anymore. We're seeing it play out in real time. So here's what we're going to break down. We'll look at this controversial blockade, get into the actual rules of the sea, and then walk through Washington's pretty shaky legal case. After that, and this is key, we'll see what kind of precedent this sets for rivals. And finally, we'll look at the true cost of all this. All right, let's set the scene. The Strait of Hormuz, it's a massive choke point. I mean, a huge amount of the world's oil passes through this tiny strip of water every single day. And the naval operation that's happening now is really challenging the idea that anyone can just sail through freely, which, as you can imagine, is creating a super tense and unpredictable situation. Okay, let's dive into the law here, because you can't really get what's going on without understanding the rules. The laws of the sea, they're not just, suggestions. They're basically the foundation that our entire system of global trade is built on. And the big one we need to talk about is something called transit passage. It's a cornerstone of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS. The easiest way to think about it is like a guaranteed international right-of-way. It says that ships from any country can pass through these critical straits, like Hormuz, without being stopped or messed with. It has to be quick and continuous. And this is not a small thing. The source material puts it perfectly. This rite of passage is literally the engine of the global economy. If you take that away, the whole system just grinds to a halt. Now, here's the part that's so important to get right. A blockade isn't just, a strongly worded letter or a sanction. According to international law, a blockade is an act of war. That's a huge distinction, because in this situation, there's been no declaration of war, no UN resolution giving the green light. So, if it's legally an act of war, how on earth is Washington justifying it? Well, this is where the legal arguments start to look, let's just say, pretty wobbly. Okay, so they're making three main arguments. First up, self-defense. But that usually requires an actual, imminent, armed attack, right? Not just a diplomatic standoff. Second, they say they're enforcing sanctions. But that doesn't just give you a free pass to stop ships from other countries in international waters. And third, they're citing the president's authority, which is fine domestically, but it doesn't automatically make something legal on the world stage. And here's the absolute kicker. The U.S. is out there enforcing rules in a strait that's governed by a treaty that it never even signed. The United States is not a party to UNCLOS, so it's basically trying to have its cake and eat it too, which makes it really, really awkward when it turns around and tells other countries to follow that same law in, say, the South China Sea. And that's the crucial point. This isn't just about what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz. It's about the precedent this sets for every other strategic waterway on the planet. And you can bet that other global powers are watching this whole thing very, very closely. I absolutely love this analogy from the source material. It says international law is basically the operating system for the world. It's the code that makes everything work predictably. And when a major power starts messing with that code for its own benefit, well, the whole system can get buggy and crash. And this slide just lays out the danger perfectly. If the U.S. says, hey, we can restrict passage here in Hormuz because it's in our interest, what's to stop China from using that exact same logic to control shipping in the South China Sea or to blockade the Taiwan Strait? It's the same argument, just flipped. And that is a really dangerous game to play. This quote just nails it. You have to imagine leaders in Beijing watching all this unfold and just thinking to themselves, good to know. Because the U.S. is basically teaching a masterclass on how to use a powerful navy to bend international law, and you better believe other countries are taking detailed notes. So what's the real long-term damage here? Well, an operation that's built on a weak legal foundation doesn't get stronger with time. It actually gets weaker. It becomes a massive strategic liability. And you can just see these problems piling up. The longer this goes on, the worse it gets. We're talking about lawsuits from shipping companies whose cargo is getting held up,
We're talking about growing diplomatic friction, even with allies. And back home, it raises serious questions about presidential power. All of these things just slowly chip away at whatever strategic goal they were trying to achieve in the first place.
And that's really the bottom line. Following international law isn't just about being nice or playing by some abstract rules. It's about legitimacy. It's what makes your actions valid in the eyes of the rest of the world. And without that legitimacy, your power is just raw force. Which brings us to the final, really unsettling question. That idea of legitimacy, it's the only thing that separates a legal military blockade from just, well, an act of piracy on the high seas. So given the incredibly shaky legal ground we've just covered, which side of that line does this fall on? That's the question everyone is asking now.